Welcome to the Healthier Communities Overview and Scrutiny meeting. Before we start the meeting today, we need to elect a new chair. So I'll hand over to Tim, our legal officer.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you, members. Yes, unfortunately, Councillor Gwyn Jenkins, the chair, unavoidably can't be here today. So, as with the last committee members, then what we need to do is please for there to be a nomination for one of you to act as chair, and for that to be seconded, and for that member then to chair the meeting, if that's possible, please. So could I call for it, if there are any nominations? Could I have a vote in favour of Councillor Evans, please? Thank you. Are you willing to act as chair, Councillor Evans?
Yes.
Thank you very much. I can ask you to move to the appropriate spot then.
Right, thank you members for me in the position of chair again. Thank you very much for that. And before we start the meeting, can I just express my, and I'm sure your condolences to Councillor Gwyn Jenkins on the recent loss of his wife, Caroline. Our thoughts are with him. Thank you very much. Before we start the meeting, I'll go through some of the house rules and we've got to follow this procedure as usual. Obviously, good afternoon to you all. And then again, another afternoon. It's a lovely afternoon. I'd like to remind you that this meeting is being broadcast live on the internet, so we're all on camera. Please be aware you may be visible on screen when people around you are speaking, and please remember to speak clearly into your microphones. This meeting is available to view online, now and in the future, whenever and wherever people want to watch it. There is no need for any other filming of the meeting to take place. We welcome the use of the Welsh language at meetings. I've had no request for people to speak Welsh today, so this meeting will be conducted in English only. I'd like to welcome everyone attending the meeting today and anyone watching the meeting via the webcast. Please can all mobiles and other noisy devices be put on the silent.
Can I do that, Chef?
You certainly can, Councillor Jeremiah. If there is an emergency, and we're not expecting one, please follow the green signs and go to the ground floor of the Civic car park. Thank you for that. And now we'll go on to the agenda. First item on the agenda is the attendance, and I assume you've all written your signatures in the attendance list that's going around. And can I ask you, Jacqueline, if we've received any apologies?
Yes, Councillor Evans, we've had apologies from Councillor Gwyn Jenkins, Gaynor James and Councillor Lenny Constance.
Thank you for that, Jacqueline. The third item on the agenda is to confirm the meetings for the meeting on April the 13th, was it?
Excuse me,
sorry.
Excuse me, Chair. Yeah, declarations of interest.
Sorry, have we any declarations to sign? If you have, please can you record them in the book that's going around. Thank you. To item 3, the minutes of the last meeting held on the 19th of April, and we'll go through them starting on page 3, and this includes the Welsh version as well to 12.
Page 3, Chair. Can I just mention that I was in attendance at that meeting, and so could I be recorded, please, as attending that meeting? I was missed on the list of officers.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
at that point, Tim, if you wish to leave, I know you're a very busy gentleman, so if you wish to leave, you can.
Thanks, Chair.
Then, so there's no declaration, so we go on to item 3 of the minutes of the last meeting. And that's on pages 3 to 12. And like I said earlier, that includes the Welsh version as well. So shall we go through them? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Anything there, members, you wish to bring up? Okay, then we proceed to item 4 on the action sheet, which is on pages 13 to 14. There is one thing that I did want to bring up regarding the action sheet. It states at the meeting date the 23rd of November 2018, developing the safeguarding agenda in schools in Torvine. We have some information that should I read a different date in November 2018?
Yes, Chair, it should be 23rd of November 2017. And we're still actually awaiting a response from that action.
Can we chase that up for an action, please? Thank you. Anything else on the actions, members? No? So we'll go on to item 5 now, which is the Wales Audit Office National Review of Housing, Adoptions, Self-Service Evaluation and Action Plan. And that's on pages 15 to 40. Jill Prattlett will be speaking to this report. Good afternoon, both. I think we've met quite recently, haven't we? And the weather was very nice that afternoon, as I recall. Welcome to the meeting. We're here to discuss the Wales Audit Office National Review of Housing Adoption Service and Self-Evaluation Action Plan this afternoon. As in previous meetings, you'll be aware that we have had a meeting prior to this meeting, and out of that meeting have come quite a large list of questions, to be honest with you. Yes. So if we could be succinct in our answering, and perhaps, obviously we want the detail of the answers, but if we can be succinct, and ensure we get through the agenda painlessly. Thank you very much. The first question that we've got is, I'd like to ask Councillor Rose Seaborn to ask.
I'm aware that the Wales Audit Office hadn't sort of come to our service, but has made a judgment on the whole of Wales. But I just wondered how our plan, actually the work stream, fitted into other strategic plans, such as the PSB's delivery plan and Social Services Wellbeing Act, and I think probably supporting people, I'm not sure. So how does this plan fit into all of those plans?
Back then, see to it now, Jill.
Shall I start? I mean, I think certainly with the strategic intentions and the principles around the Social Services and Wellbeing Act and the other areas that you mentioned, Councillor Seaborn, is very much around choice and promoting independence. And the DFGs and the adaptations programme very much is a response to that meets those principles. I mean, we, in all the conversations that we have with people when we ask them what matters, is their home is very much high on that list. So it is about they want to live their life, but in the house that they want to live it in the neighbourhood they want to live it in that network and peer group that they've grown up with, or certainly have those relationships with. So housing and adaptations are very much on top of the list about how we kind of meet those requirements and independence. And I don't know whether, Joe, you want to add to that.
I mean, we've got in our vision for our teams and our patchwork, which the OTs are very much part of. We've got promoting independence, which would be around your functional tasks of bathing and kitchen and that sort of thing, and that's where your DFGs might come in for that. You've got positive risk taking, so how can I improve my life? I may have to take some risks, but how can I minimise those risks? And that's where your equipment comes in, and again adaptations and promoting social interaction. How can I get out of my house? How can I access the community? And very much again around minor adaptations for handrails and DFGs for larger adaptations. So it fits quite nicely into voice, choice and control and those three strap lines.
I'm just conscious of time, Chair, and I will be very, very quick, but just let's say one of the other things that people are raising with us about what's important is, say they want the independence, they don't want carers coming in, commissioned carers coming in, and I understand that. So if they can do things themselves, they want to be able to do it themselves.
A supplementary vote?
No, that's fine.
No, thank you. Leads us on to the next question, which I'll ask Councillor Faye Jones to ask, please.
Thank you. Hi both. I was just wondering, we acknowledge the work that the PSB has done to identify needs. What actions are proposed to meet this needs, and how will the work complement your activities?
So, Councillor Jones, can I just be checking then around the PSB work? Are you talking about the future generations and the population needs assessment? Or
Yes, I think we are.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Appendix 1, sorry. Okay. Here we are. Oh, right, okay, thank you. We certainly know from the PNA that we've got an increase in demand, and that is going to further increase going forward. One of the things I think we've highlighted in the report, one of the risks is that we will not have sufficient financial grant, DFG grant, to facilitate to absorb any further demand. I think in the report, I think we've highlighted the amount of money year on year that we are topping up the DFG grant, which obviously we have from the Capital Board. However, it's been opportune in some of the grant funding that we've been able to plough into that. So as far as our strategic direction, we know certainly around the numbers, and as far as our service response about OTs and the demand on OTs, and maybe Joe can talk a little bit more about trusted assessors in a moment, we have built in how we build capacity or respond to that demand differently. However, when it comes to the actual funding of either the bricks and mortar or the equipment, that is certainly a significant challenge we have. Joe, I don't know, do you want to mention something about the trusted assessor?
I mean, in each of our patch teams, we've got OTs, obviously, but we've got OTAs, we've got enablement assistants, we've got CCWs,
Community care workers,
sorry. Within those roles, they have all been assessed and trained to become what we call trusted assessors, so they can do lower level adaptation, so they could make recommendations for things like basic shower rooms, handrails, the more basic level. OTs are still needed for the sort of more complex needs where you need to put hoists and things in, or extensions, but our trusted assessors can do the lower level, so we've broadened out the numbers of people that can do those assessments in terms of how we manage demand. We do have waiting lists for OT, but we manage that in a different way in terms of getting the right person to go at the right time. But as Jill said, the cost pressure then is going to become more difficult as the years go forward. Our contracts have brought the cost of grants down, but we've still got a demand pressure in terms of numbers.
You wish to have supplementary, please?
Can I just ask a quick one? Can I just ask, considering how we are about budgets in the future, have you got a way of prioritising certain cases, certain people, or does it just work on the patches and sort of when we get round to it?
Our priority is always going to be around people with a life-limiting illness. We may not necessarily do a full adaptation or grant there, but we may look at how we can support somebody with life-limiting illness. That would always come first. Manual handling needs come a close second to that, and then functional independence is a close third to that.
Okay, thank you.
The third question, which relates to Appendix 1, reference 2.3, and I'd like to ask Councillor Jeremiah to take this, please.
I think there's reference in the papers about the allocation that we make to care and repair. I think on page 18, you'll see that we currently, our allocation to care and repair is 59,000 a year. It has been since 2013-14. However, in 16-17 there was a new grant that was introduced called an Enable grant, which comes from Welsh Government. So that has been allocated to care and repair. We have some very good data from care and repair on a monthly basis. We know exactly how many people they've seen, the cost of the average cost of each intervention. We know month by month what they've got left in the budget. Yeah. And Joe very much is that contact and touches base several times throughout the year to see how that spend is going. Then we make some decisions on topping up that budget so that we know that whatever we agree in additional contributions to care and repair, they will spend that up to the year. So, and to be fair, the care and repair are also very good at tapping in on a national basis if there's any slippage on a national basis, because there are some care and repair agencies that may not actually spend all their allocation, then they have a system themselves of reallocating across Wales. So I absolutely confidence from the care and repair that we maximise that budget, and I would say the same for the DFGs and the 1.5k as well, which is on page 27. Thank you, Jill. And again, you can see our allocation, certainly from 15-16 from Capital Board, has been around the 1.1 million. Out of that we take the 69k allocation to care and repair. And you can see from 15-16, we've made contributions from the Adult Services Revenue Budget. Again, we have monthly budget information, which we do reconciliations on a monthly basis. As you can appreciate, what happens is that There is a recommendation as far as an intervention. There will be an indicative amount, particularly where we're talking about an extension. Sometimes those costs slightly vary. So at the end of that piece of work, we ensure that if there's any additional costs that they're factored in, or likewise, if the piece of work hasn't been able to be taken forward, for example, there may be a change of circumstances in that client, then we should ensure that's taken off the budget estimates as well. So we do that on a monthly basis. Then normally around December, we do that. We do those estimates of what's going to be going through for the last 3 months, what we need to allocate, and what's going to be done in that time frame. So I think we're pretty much spot on about. And we also have to do a little element around maintenance charge, maintenance allowance that we build in as well. So I would say that we have quite a tight rein, ensuring that we're using that money appropriately and spending that.
Supplementary. I just wanted to ask a question, Jill, while we're on the finance subject. You mentioned in the report about the winter funding that you had, and it could possibly be a one-off, I understand that. What sum are we talking about there? And it was able to fill that gap, as you pointed out in the report.
Top at 96,000. I think we pulled from the winter fund. It was an allocation we had from Welsh Government, and I would say we had that near enough towards the end of the winter. So it was opportune that actually the demand of kind of the hospital flow had already decreased, so we were able to use that. So it's 96,000 we put from the winter pressures.
So is it fair to say that without that funding we would have struggled to give services?
Well, we used, if the 96,000 was part of that contribution from revenue, so we would have had to have taken the revenue from the third party budget, and yeah, services could have suffered as a result of that.
Thank you both for that. We'll go on to question number 5 now, which is relating to Appendix 1, reference 2.3. And can I ask Councillor Nick Jones to take this, please?
Yes, thank you both. This paragraph here is actually about reclaiming the costs of grants on house sales. It's not about utilising properties that have been previously adapted. So what processes do you have in place to actually manage this?
Okay, so we've got a policy that manages it. We write out when we first agree a grant to say that we'll agree so much money. There may be a client contribution to that, and then we add that on. There may be an agency fee if they choose to use our sort of draw-in facility with the surveyors. They can choose to use their own, so it's a 15% agency fee. And then comes to a total amount. We then put a land charge on the property, so that if the property is due to be sold, we can reclaim the money from that land charge on the property. Usually solicitors will write to us and say, do you really want this money back? And we write back and say, yes, we do. So there is quite a tight process around pulling that money back in, and then we pull that money back into the DFG budget and we recycle it in that way.
Yes, Nick.
Can I just bring you back to the actual question that it was asking? It was more around the properties which have been adapted and reusing those properties because they won't necessarily be within the for sale sector. It's about properties that are being generally adapted
with the RSLs.
To make them, yes, so that we can actually recycle those properties to people who need those adaptations.
So this is about not about DFGs, obviously, because those are for owner-occupier properties. So this is more about the PAGs. Yeah, this is sorry, my mind's gone blank. PAG stands for...
it's an agency grant that's used for the RSLs.
Physical Adaptations Grant. So obviously for those properties would be recycled, it would be with the registered social landlords.
Yeah.
So if there is a physical adaptation grant allocated through it would be Melyn, Bronavon, or whatever the local RSLs are, then they would keep that on a register. So if that property became available, they would know on their housing register what properties have been adapted, and they would then do that through the matching when they have new applications.
We've got an SLA with the Bronavon OTs, and they do the matching for us.
Wish a supplementary, Nick?
Yes, just very, very briefly. So can we confirm that if a property has been already adapted, that the next tenant or the next user of that property will have the need for what's been adapted into there, rather than it being allocated into the general housing problem?
If there is somebody on the housing homeless register, the home seeker register, that needs those adaptations, then yes, it is property matched. Not every adaptation can be property matched because it may be very bespoke. But in general terms, if it's adapted and if there is somebody waiting for a house with those adaptations, then they're property matched.
You happy with that response, Nick?
So theoretically, we can have a house which we might potentially have spent quite a bit of money adapting, and we might have somebody living in there potentially for a long period of time that doesn't actually need those adaptations. We don't actually keep them aside specifically for this then?
There's a register of properties that are adapted. There's a gold banding for people who need the properties. There may be somebody in the gold banding that has those needs for those exact adaptations. If somebody in gold banding has that need for that exact adaptation, they will go into that property, and they'll go through all the bandings until they find somebody with that exact need. They will then, if they can't match exactly, they'll try and match as exactly as they can, but there may always be bespoke adaptations that they can't match to. Somebody, for example, we may put a closet-mat toilet in. Not everybody is going to need a closet-mat toilet. A closet-mat toilet is a toilet that manages your hygiene for you. Not everybody, unless you've got a really complex disability, is going to need that. So there may be a need to take that part of the adaptation out and replace with an ordinary, but not the whole adaptation. Does that answer?
I guess that would be the same with the stair lifts. There might be that stair lift can be removed because there is a greater need for that property for a different reason. So it's down to the individual circumstances.
And some of the adaptations, like stair lifts, we can recycle.
Yes, thank you. That's exactly what we were getting at, to make sure that we weren't duplicating the spend when the facilities were already within the system.
I could think just another example is ramping, where I think previously, going back quite a few years, but they might used to use concrete ramps. Now they use modular ramps that will be fitted. However, if the needs of that person change or that person is actually, we can take that modular ramping away and we will recycle and use that in a different property.
Yes, Pete?
I just wanted to ask you quickly, what happens if somebody lives in a private rented accommodation? Would you adapt that home as well?
We adapt those homes as well through the DFG grant, but we need the landlord's permission. So as long as we've got the landlord's permission, we're fine. We can go ahead and do it. There's procedures in place to get that permission. The landlord has to act responsibly, so we have to have good reasons from the landlord why not, and we do scrutinise those reasons as well.
Thank you.
Could I just ask Joe to lay down, and I don't expect you've got those figures to hand, but you mentioned about the clawback on DFGs particularly. In your experience, have we clawed back much in the past?
I haven't got the figures to hand. I haven't got the figures to hand, but we don't claw back an awful lot, 'cause we only claw back if somebody passes away and the property sold, or if somebody unfortunately goes into residential nursing home and there's no other person in that house. So it is a small amount, but we can probably find the amount and let you know.
Thank you very much for that. We go on to question number 6 now, which is there a waiting list for DFG's fast-track adoptions and care and repair?
Okay, in terms of care and repair, there isn't a waiting list. They manage their waiting lists and there isn't a waiting list. In terms of low-cost adaptations in DFG, it is very much dependent on those trusted assessor assessments and the OT assessments. Unfortunately, we always have an OT waiting list, regardless of how much resources we put into that. So there is a little bit of a delay then before it goes through to the surveyor. We now have 2 surveyors and a clerk of works, which is a slightly bigger team than we have before. So once it gets to the surveyor, then there is no delay. But there is a delay occasionally between the OT assessment and getting to the surveyors to carry out the work.
Can I just add to that, Councillor Evans, as Joe has already alluded to, when we're looking at the allocation and priorities, we don't go on a date order. The OTs look at the risks involved and the priorities of those assessments. So if there is somebody with a life-limiting illness and around a specific manual handling need, those are the referrals that will be prioritised.
And we will look for temporary solutions as well before we do the adaptation. So if there's a temporary solution that we can put in place that might hold somebody, hold the need for somebody, hold the risk for somebody while we look at adaptations, we'll always try and do that first anyway.
And can I ask on the back of that, Joe, you mentioned about the OT waiting list. Can you give us an example of the waiting list, the current waiting list?
It's different in each of the patches. It is also dependent on how many Bronavon properties and Melin properties are in each of the patches, because obviously they would do their own adaptation work. The north of the borough tends to have more waiting than the south of the borough. So in the Blanavon patch at the moment, there are about 15 people waiting. In the Pontypool patch, 7. In the west team, 7. In the central team, 12. And in the east team, there's nobody waiting at the moment.
And what you will see is the regular email exchanges. If there's somebody who has a critical need on that patch, they will have that conversation across the patches to make sure that client is responded to. So we don't have a postcode lottery of a number of people in high need waiting longer in one area than other. We would move resources across.
Thank you both. We're going to question 7 now, and I'd like to ask Councillor Rose Seaborn to ask this question, please.
Thanks very much. You've touched on it with life limiting and what have you, but if a full grant is used, how is this categorised within the council? When I was working in environmental management, it was A, B and C. Is it still that? So A is the...
A would have been the critical, B would have been the substantial,
So
and C would have been... no, we don't categorise them in A, B and C anymore. We still have... I guess we could. We still have priority 1. Priority 1 is your terminal illness, life-limiting illness, complex disability, risks around manual handling. Priority 2 would be around your functional abilities, so your level access showers, kitchen adaptations, those sorts of things. And then priority 3 is more about getting out of the house and being able to move out in the outside environment. For children, that would be garden space as well, because they need play space under the DFG regulation.
Do we ever touch the category 3?
Yes, oh yes, we do. And care and repair significantly in that, because some of those adaptations are lower adaptations in terms of rails and things, and they can make so much difference to somebody's independence.
I'll ask question 8, and that is, what is the maximum amount that can be allocated to a DFG?
£35,000. Sorry? £35,000.
Is there any examples of sometimes having to go over the £35,000?
Previously, we offered a discretionary top-up grant, as we called it. We don't offer that anymore. There are property loans that people can gain access to through the council, to being able to loan the money to pay that what used to be a top-up grant back. So we would only go as far as 35,000.
There have been some kind of exceptional circumstance where we were signed off, and you may correct me, Joe, I think where it'd been agreed, and once they'd done some of the excavation work, the builders came across something that they hadn't expected. So I think
Unforeseen works,
unforeseen works.
In one particular property, there was unforeseen works that we couldn't have accounted for before we did the grant, and it was not really fair to expect the service user in that instance to pay that money back, because they couldn't have foreseen it either. Nobody could have foreseen it.
So there are exceptions then?
There are exceptions. They're very rare,
Right.
but there are exceptions.
Thank you both for that. What to question 10 now, appendix 1.
Health colleagues actually don't do adaptations, but what we will do is work with the RSLs. Certainly on the recommendations, what we have to agree with our partner agencies is to agree some joint standards and publish those in a single format, and then to produce an annual report. So there is, we'll start to have conversations now, particularly with the RSLs, but bring really a task and finish group together. What we've never really done is to brought all those elements together. We have our standards, we set our targets against the DFGs and low cost adaptations, and we report against those. The RSLs have done something similar. We've never actually brought those together, so we will be working with our partners now to see how we bring those together and get those. I think one of the criticisms from the audit, so not to Orion specific, was that actually if you're a member of the public, it can be quite confusing about, well, if I'm in this property, what can I access, or if I'm in that property. So we'll bring all that information together in a leaflet on a website that will be clear to the public.
We've got a common adaptations policy with Bronavon. So our adaptation policy and their adaptation policy mirrors. We need to bring in the other RSLs into Ovine to see if we can do the mirroring across. So it wouldn't matter what tenure of house you were in, you could expect the same adaptation, and then underneath that, what standard of adaptation that you could expect to receive.
Which is supplementary, Councillor Jimmy? No? Okay, yes.
I was just thinking that when we were asking about health, we were thinking about people who were in hospital waiting to come out and waiting for adaptations, and I just wondered how you got around that, because perhaps health don't understand everything that's going on in Torvine.
I think it's fair to say there's probably some more work to do. However, particularly when people are going to hospital and maybe they've had a stroke, amputation, those kind of incidences, probably the ward staff probably think a little bit more focused about, actually this may impact on somebody's housing, so maybe they're a bit quicker to refer in. However, we didn't have any delays. Certainly, I was recently looking at the analysis for last year, for 17-18, so I know we didn't have any delays for DFGs over the last 13 months. But because what we do is where we've identified somebody that may need some significant adaptations, we will look at using a step-down bed and continuing their rehab programme within one of the step-down beds whilst their adaptation is done. But there are times where I would suggest that the ward staff don't always consider actually the use of stairs in a property and things like that, that we just need to have we need to do some more work there.
Thank you.
Now we go on to question 11, which is Appendix 1, Reference 4, and I'd like to ask Joe to take this, please.
Thank you. We acknowledge the work you've done to streamline and simplify the documentation, but the recommendation asks for this to be done across all organisations within the county borough. How is this planned?
Again, it's about that task and finish group really, and aligning our adaptation policies and then aligning the documentation underneath it as much as we possibly can.
I think one thing, what we don't do is have an intervention from a local authority OT and then duplicate that in an RSL OT, which does happen in some areas. We have good working relationships. I say the majority of our tenants in Torvine are supported through Bronavon, and so that's where that's where we have a local SLA with the OTs in Bronavon.
So we would work to the Vanguard principles of no handoffs as well. So if a local authority OT had started, but then later on down the line that person moved into a Bronavon property, we would continue until that piece of work was finished, and vice versa from the Bronavon OT. So that there is a principle of one OT and no handoff.
Oh, just to confirm then, if a resident makes an application and it goes through different organisations, they wouldn't be redoing the same application, the same paperwork?
No,
we
share paperwork across the organisations now, but in terms of streamlining that and making that simpler, there may be an opportunity to do that once the Task and Finish group has made their recommendations.
Can I ask a question about the OT assessment? You work with the RSLs, as you said. Have you had any incidents where the OTs disagree with the outcomes of the OTs?
I can figure one as well.
There has been a difference of opinion. We've got a particular one in Blanavon where
I wasn't aware that.
where maybe what happened there was the local authority OT had recommended something in terms of, in this case, ceiling track hoist. When the feasibility study was done in terms of how we would do that, the Bronavon OT, because of Bronavon property, disagreed with the recommendation. And then what we need to do then is to find out why they disagreed. And in this particular case, the cost of doing what they needed to do to the overall building, to do an adaptation for a single person in that building, outweighed the outcomes. It was a block of flats. So there's 6 other people living in that property, so that the disruption for those other tenants and the cost for those other tenants would have outweighed the outcomes for the individual tenant concerned. So there are those sorts of things that we need to take into consideration as well.
So it's very rare that you come across those conflicts?
Yeah, because we share the same adaptation policy. It is rare, but we were obviously considering the individual tenant's need, whereas Bronavon have got a duty to consider the whole of that block.
Yeah. And as I say, when you ask that question, I could think of one and you could think of the same one, so that's kind of puts it into context about numbers, really.
Like I said, I didn't have no knowledge of that, and I won't bring it up from that aspect. Thank you very much, both. One question, 12.
Have you worked with the planning authority to streamline the planning permission process for all those adaptations that require approval?
We have done some work with our planning department. We probably could do a bit more, but from their planning perspective, they would see us as a customer, the same as they would see any other private person coming towards doing an adaptation or an extension to their property. They wouldn't necessarily put us.
They wouldn't prioritise. And I can understand that, because if you were a member of the public, you would have a view about, well, actually, we're working on behalf of a member of the public, so each member of the public has to be given the same equity there. But certainly where we did experience delays, when we also, on a quarterly basis, we look at the length of time taken to do a grant, and where we see some exceptional spikes, we can dig down into that to understand why. And we had a theme of long time frame for where the Welsh Water
Build over sewer agreement.
Yeah, over, what's it called? Build over sewer agreements were needed. And we met with a very nice gentleman from Welsh Water, And actually we came to an agreement about how we could run some, because what was happening before, we would have to go through planning, and then it was only after planning agreed that Welsh Water, we could then approach Welsh Water for the over sewer agreement. So what we were able to negotiate was that we could run both in parallel, which cut down significantly on some of the delays. So we do obviously look at to see the impact of any planning permission, but it gets very complex about over sewer agreements, which certainly opened my eyes.
Just supplementary.
So is that often problematic then, waiting for planning permission?
In the last year, no, it hasn't been. Previously, it has been, but in the last year, I can say, hand on heart, there's been one, maybe two cases where we've waited for planning.
Just to put it in context, we have 2 surveyors, and if they do have a query, what they tend to do is pick up the phone. So to ensure that actually it's not going to go into planning, and then with a query coming out, that they will preempt into thinking, oh, not sure about this, and they'll have a conversation so that they can sort that out before it comes into planning.
Again, we're using the Vanguard principles to put your expertise up front. So if you're not sure about what you're drawing or what you're looking at, have a conversation first and get it right first time.
Yeah. Okay. I just ask a question in relation to this topic, and it's about planning. Lots of them are low planning issues, really, in want of a better word. Obviously, some are bigger and need to go to planning committee, but I would imagine a lot of them are decided under delegated powers.
Yeah, it would be the extensions mainly that would go to planning, and the others then under delegated powers. Yeah, so if there was a particular issue around bathroom plumbing is usually the issue that can be done under delegated power.
Sorry to stay on this topic, but it can cause a backlog, can't it, with the planning. What's the worst case you've had where you've just quoted one with the water board and you dealt with that? What's the worst case you've had and the length of time you've had to wait?
Like I say, this year there hasn't been that many, so I couldn't pull from this year. We could probably find the information and pass it to you.
Just a general question.
I think on top of my head there was something that was
2 months maybe.
For the Welsh Water ones, it was a lot longer.
Longer than that, yeah.
The Welsh Water ones were coming up to
3-6 months.
Yeah, probably longer than that.
But the planning ones were 2 or 3 months.
I'm mindful about the priority cases in the gold band area. You know, the length of time for that to be resolved, if they are in that gold band area, is not very nice for the person waiting for the adoption.
Obviously, again, with the DFGs, they wouldn't be looking at gold band because they're owner-occupier, so we're not talking about properties with the RSLs.
Only private occupiers we would do the DFGs for. Yeah.
Thank you both. Go on to question. Sorry.
Could I just go back to the question before and just ask for that person who was recommended a hoist by the county OT and then Bronavon OT couldn't because of taking other people into consideration? What happened to that person then and the need for a hoist?
She's been, that person in particular has been rehoused. She is now in one of our extra care facilities, and so all her needs are being met within that facility.
That's good, thank you.
We go on to question 13 now, and that's Appendix 1, Reference 6.3, and I'll ask Councillor Joanne Gordon to take this one again, please.
Yeah, looking at that recommendation, it's sensible to vet the contractors who are going to be carrying out the works. Can we ask how often are the experience checks completed, because financial situations for businesses can change so quickly?
Experience, every time the framework comes up for renewal, experience checks are done, so that would be every 2 to 3 years, depending on where they are in the framework. If we've got concerns about any contractors, then we can do it more often. It's not very often about the sort of financial standing of the companies, it's more about quality and feedback that we get, and some of the reason why our calendar days are up on the longer, on the low-cost grants this year is because we suspended 2 contractors from the framework not because of cost issues in terms of their finances, but in terms of quality.
Okay.
You said that if you had concerns, you could go back and do checks. Does that happen often?
Certainly, when we look to suspend a contractor off the framework for a period of time while they improve, then yes, we would involve our contract monitor officer within that and look at all the quality issues, all the feedback. They may even look at the accounts at that point. Depends what the issue is in terms of. It could be that the finished product doesn't look as it should look. It could be that they haven't done the sort of snagging that they call it at the end of the job. It could be that the service user's not getting what they thought they were getting, or they're paying for additional private works. Those sorts of things.
Just to pick up on Joe's point, it's very much around the quality issues rather than the financial issues that certainly in our experience that are raised. As you said, it is quite a volatile industry. However, so the surveyors, clerk of the works work very closely with the contractors, and in such a small area, I would suggest you pick up quite quickly on Torvine's quite a small area. You do pick up on if you have any concerns, it quickly goes through the industry, should we say.
Yeah. Just to pick up on that, when we did the original review many years ago and brought everybody together, the RSLs and the care and repair, quality of the work was a major influence over our residents, and that was the main concern, that they weren't shutting the electric off when the electric was desperately needed, and the water on dialysis, etc. And we suggested a priority list of contractors. Is that still in place?
What we've got now is our ProActis system. So there's a framework that everybody needs to meet to get onto that ProActis system. There are lots within the ProActis system then for general builders or stair lift contractors or people who specialise in level access showers, that sort of thing. And then they are awarded then the contract on price and quality, depending on.
And as Joe said, some of the feedback then from one particular contractor during last year, when the clerk of the works was going out to do the end of the snagging list and whatever, it certainly transpired that particular contractor was taking on too much work. So he was invited to meet with officers and it was agreed that he would not be awarded any more work until he'd finished off all his existing contracts, and then we would review, which happened. But I think that was just a contractor who wanted to do as much as they can, but then realised they couldn't finish everything off appropriately. So we absolutely have a mechanism in place where we pull in and say, no, come
Okay, so we'll go on to question number 14, which relates to Appendix 1, reference 6.3, and can I ask Councillor Nick Jones to take this, please?
Yes, thank you very much. We'll perhaps later questions will talk about the actual process once work has started and gone on. But this question relates to the taking on of contractors in the first place. You've got on there a list of some of the processes that you go through. Are you aware of any other checks that could be done relating to contractors that can be done? Things like DBS and maybe this list isn't exhaustive, but if you can maybe talk a little bit about how people get onto the approved list, and is it rigorous, and can we look at things like DBS?
The process that the contractors go through is overseen by procurement, by a procurement officer there, Andy Macy. We did consider DBS checks, and we have put that people should should have DBS checks within the organisation. So there would be periodic checks of that organisation for DBS checks of the contractors that they use. So the DBS is put against the main contractor. If they were then to sublet, which they don't do very often, but then we would check that they had the DBS as well, and then periodic checks from our commissioning team to check that they've got the DBS happen.
But your comment is that list exhaustive? I guess there is always be something that you could add to that, and I guess that's to getting the balance right of the checks and balances of ensuring that we have contractors that will work with us as well, and what's reasonable. So yes, it is reasonable that we have robust systems in place, including the DBS, but I guess there is potentially, if you doubled the list, it could also be off-putting as well for some contractors. It's getting the balance right, but making sure we manage the risk.
So just to come back on that, so are we then, am I hearing now that anybody working in a client's home will be subject to a DBS and they will be covered in that respect?
Yeah, they should be covered with a DBS. They should also be used to working with vulnerable adults, and we've also done some safeguarding work as well.
But one thing I would say is with the contractors, sometimes there is a turnover, and when you are going out, they have staff that leave, they have new staff. So I couldn't put my hand on my heart and say 100% of the staff at any point in time have had that check because of the turnover. However, we do, as Joe said, we go out and we do those periodic checks, and with the safeguarding awareness and whatever, that will go on periodically. But it's at certain times of the year, so it is not as soon as one person starts with a contractor that they have to have all that done prior to them taking on. You have to be quite clear on that.
Sorry, if I can just wrap that up. Are you saying to us then that you're actually satisfied that the process that you've got in place at this moment in time is robust enough, or is it something that you feel that maybe you should have another look at to make sure that it is actually robust enough?
I feel it is robust enough. I think that it's proportionate, and we're sure that we have monitoring systems in place, that we are testing that on a regular basis throughout the year.
Can I just ask a question leading on the back of that, really? You mentioned about sometimes there's instances where contractors bring different people into the job for different reasons. Do the contractors make you aware of that situation?
Again, they're supposed to. I can't hand on heart say that they do every time, but they're supposed to. Yeah. Our clerk of works would know that by asking the questions when the clerk of works is out there checking jobs.
Why I mentioned that is it's going back to the DBS part that we talked about earlier. Thank you. And 15 now, which relates to Appendix 1 6.5, and I'm asking this question. What does the warranty mean to clients in real terms, and how do you deal with the latent defects?
Okay, so there is a warranty in place for all the work that we do. In terms of latent defects, what sort of thing are you thinking about?
Well, defects after the warranty is expired, really.
Okay. So after the warranty is expired, it is the service user's responsibility to maintain the equipment. We do advise them to undertake a contract with somebody, a maintenance contract with somebody to do that, or an insurance policy to do that. Obviously, if people don't do that, because we're working with vulnerable people, we will, depending on the risk, put it right for them that time. But again, we would then look for them to put an insurance policy or some kind of arrangement in with the maintaining organisation.
I would just, I guess it's like when we buy a washing machine. We know that we've got that 1 year warranty. We explained to the customer at the time, say the options of taking on that additional insurance, and some people choose to do that and some people don't. However, it's very explicit at the time that is only covered for, the warranty only covers for a year.
I just say, with the greatest respect, Jill, we can't compare a washing machine to some of the adoptions that we do, and I feel that in some instances we are dealing with vulnerable people, as you pointed out, Joe. I feel a bit more reassured that we, in cases like that, we do deal with it.
Yeah. Especially things like stair lifts, we wouldn't leave somebody without the stair lift. We tend to work with care and repair in those instances. A care and repair are used to dealing with those incidences and can support somebody to get that insurance and maintenance contract in place. So they can be hand-holded through that if that's what's needed.
Thank you very much. Yes?
Thank you. Can you just confirm then, thinking of the equipment that carers, that staff coming into people's own homes would be using, the moving and handling equipment, that would come under the authority's insurance programme for maintenance and inspections?
Yeah. The DFG part that we would do would be probably the ceiling tack hoist, gantry equipment that we would do. But yeah, that would all come under our GWISIS contract, really. Yeah.
They are now tested twice yearly. Yeah.
Lola regulations.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll go to question 16 now, which is Appendix 1 and 6.5. And I'll ask Councillor Fay-Jones to take this, please.
Hi, I think this question neatly moves on from what we've already been discussing, and that is there any complaints process to resolve warranty issues?
We don't actually get warranty issues very often. Usually they're referred to me as the group manager, warranty issues, and we usually take as pragmatic a approach as we can. We wouldn't leave somebody without being able to use their equipment. So very rarely do we get complaints as such on that issue. And if there was a complaint, yeah, there is a complaints process in place through our complaints officer, Karen Davis, who would deal with that if there was a formal complaint made.
Could I just ask how long the warranty is?
It's a year.
That doesn't seem very long.
I think that is kind of in lines with the other local authorities as well. I think when that came through Cabinet, I think, but we did do that benchmarking exercise across Wales to ensure that we were, obviously what we were offering was appropriate and fair and in line with other local authorities.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question on the back of Councillor Fay-Jones's question, really? And we've already touched on the washing machine scenario, where you can go into buy a washing machine and purchase, when you purchase the washing machine, a 5-year warranty. Have we thought of extending the 1-year warranty in the future to a 2-year, 3-year?
We previously had those lengths of warranties in place, but we came to Cabinet with a recommendation to reduce to 1 year. And that was what came forward there. If members would like us to look at something different, then we're quite happy to do so. Cost would be involved in then. So
that was the rationale to reduce it. It was the cost implications.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Joe.
Yes, thank you. I think maybe what we've just been discussing is maybe more of the electrically type of sort of items as such. This question probably relates more to the building sort of works, which is a very much bigger project and very often comes with normally a much longer kind of warranty guarantee kind of thing, just so we can differentiate where the question's coming from. And really what it's about, and it relates to the contractors, that if an issue is actually identified, how is it actually recorded and resolved? And then does it then affect a contractor's rating for being issued further work?
Yeah, it is recorded and resolved. A clerk of works would be involved in resolving the issues, and the surveyor, depending on what the issue was. And yes, there is a quality rating. We produce questionnaires for people to fill in for us, and any issues raised on the questionnaire, then we drill down to on an individual basis, and then quality is put into our tenders. It's mainly, I've got to say, it is mainly on price though.
So that, as we're talking buildings, certainly there is the client can come back and have that conversation. If 6 months, 12 months down the line, if something is not right with that extension, they would still come back and work through the clerk of the works, who would be that liaison with the contractor.
I suppose the natural supplementary to that would be, whereas we've discovered there's a one-year warranty on bits and pieces, electrical bits and pieces. Is there a longer warranty in that case on building works?
We don't have a longer warranty in that term on building works. It would be up to the actual contractor themselves and what regulations that each contractor will have their own warranty on the building work. So it would depend on the contractor selected.
However, we do have a role there, which has said that the clerk of the works and surveyors would take out, actually, if some of that deterioration is not reasonable, then we have commissioned that work, and we would be acting with that contractor to say that we would expect them to be putting things right if their standard of work is not appropriate.
For example, if we put a level access shower in and that level access shower developed a leak, then we would go back to the contractor, and it would be up to that contractor to sort that out using their insurance policies and things. But we would ensure that that work was completed to the correct standard.
Okay, Nick. We go on to question 18 now, Appendix 1, reference 6.11. Can I ask Councillor Mike Jeremiah to take this, please? If you wish to take it. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Yes, this next question does follow on a little bit from what we are discussing, because we were wondering, after these works are completed, now bearing in mind some of these works are quite major projects, do we actually have a programme where we'll go back to these clients, and we're thinking more like a year or 18 months down the line, to do an investigation to find out, because obviously once it's first done, everybody's really happy, oh great, this has made my life absolutely fantastic. Do we actually go back afterwards and check what it's been like to live with these adaptations, really looking at it for the individual to make sure it still meets their needs, but also to do some form of investigation to see if we could have done it differently, and maybe we can use that differently in the way that we do other projects going forward, and we might be able to streamline what we do and how we do. So basically, do we go back and ask and find out how appropriate the work that we've done is?
It is something that we discussed quite a few years ago about. Obviously, we wanted to monitor and see what difference has has the adaptation made, or could we have done something differently? We started to do some of that follow-up work with the OTs, but I have to say, due to the pressures on the OTs and the waiting list, unfortunately we haven't been able to follow that up in practice.
So that they would always check within the first 6 to 8 weeks of that adaptation being made. Is it fit for purpose? Is it doing what we intended it to do? They could, if it wasn't, they could make tweaks and changes. But in a year's time, in 2 years' time, no, we wouldn't, because as Jill said, capacity doesn't allow us to.
And I would absolutely agree. I think that would be a very valued piece of work to do. But it's very much down to capacity of the occupational therapist to follow up.
May I, Chair? Do you think that that's something that you could put into your work programme going forward? Now we recognise that could be a very valuable piece of work, which might actually release further time going forward and cost the authorities less.
I think it would be very much dependent of it, if additional resources are made available. I take your point that it could free up resources. However, when you're starting to do that follow-up now for 12 months, there is something about you would have to take occupational therapy resource off their current off the current waiting list to cover that at the moment. And what we don't know is that it's that probably that double run. So it would mean an additional resource at this stage. So it's very much that I would love to say to you, yes, we can put that into operation next week. If we did that, the waiting list that we've got would increase.
Would perhaps a written letter or a questionnaire to the service users, they wouldn't necessarily need an OT visit unless some issues came out from the actual response. Maybe we could just put together a questionnaire that could go out.
There is something maybe that we could follow up. We have an annual questionnaire, and there is something maybe that we could adjust the annual questionnaire to include a question on if you've had adaptations in the last 12 months. That is certainly something that we could consider.
Right, we'll go on to question 20 now, which is Appendix 1 again, obviously, is reference 7. And can I ask Councillor Fay-Jones to take this, please?
Yes, thank you. Does focusing on maximising take-up of the DFG's adaptations contradict the work already successfully done to redesign adult social care? I'll repeat it for you. Does focusing on making sure there's enough take-up of the DFGs and adaptations, so concentrating on making sure everyone's homes are adapted, contradict the work already successfully done to redesign adult social care into Patches of the Vanguard?
I would suggest they're complementary, because actually I think, as we previously touched on, the way of working is about maximising independence, and the patchworking and the vanguard working would see actually what's important and what's the least intrusive option, and adaptations and equipment may well be the least intrusive option. So I think it's complementary, I would suggest.
That's great, thank you. I think it was a question we all felt had to be asked. Yeah.
Thank you, Fay. We'll take question 21 now, which is Appendix 1, reference 7. And I'm going to ask Councillor Jo Gordon to take this, please.
Thank you. So recommendation 7 describes working with the partners. Does this work contribute towards the pooling of budgets?
I think Jo will probably be able to have a bit more detail than I have, but certainly the way the budgets are set up from Welsh Government around a physical adaptation grant and a disabled facilities grant, and the different way they're allocated and the different criteria doesn't lend themselves into coming into one pooled budget. However, that doesn't stop us as partner organisations sharing that information and on an annual basis publishing what has been spent by each organisation, so you can still have an amalgamation of all the information as far as the budgets, but it doesn't mean that you, for example, there's very tight regulations that if somebody wanted a DFG, we wouldn't be able to, for example, dip into money allocated through the physical adaptations grant to an RSL, and that's very much the way that the budgets are allocated through Welsh Government. But to say, that doesn't stop us from seeing what we have across in the borough about what is spent on adaptations and the way we present that to the public.
The grant itself is person-specific. Although it comes into a pot of money as DFG funding, it is the actual person that applies for the DFG funding. So it is tied to an individual. So a person applies for a PAG grant any person applies for DFG, so you couldn't, there would be no way of meshing it together really.
Just to say thank you, that was a concise answer. Thank you.
Earlier on, you mentioned that sometimes there was a wait for planning, and that just went for DFGs, which is privately owned houses. Does that mean that people who live in privately owned houses are perhaps at a bit of a disadvantage compared to those who are within their social landlord's care, in a sense?
Please correct me if I'm wrong, but if somebody's having a PAG, they would looking at an extension, they would also need, the RSLs would also need to apply for planning permission.
As well.
Yes, they would.
It was just that we mentioned earlier something about a waiting list that only applied to DFGs.
No, sorry, it's my fault. It's probably the way that I conveyed that. What I meant was the local authority, so the surveyors employed by the local authority would only be involved in the DFG applications. So the applications coming from the RSLs would be submitted by the RSLs. So apologies, that was the way I didn't convey that.
Yeah, I think I understand that now. So it means that there isn't really any difference in waiting lists or anything. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll go on to question number 22 now, which is Appendix 1 again, reference 7. This is a question I'm asking. How are the discussions with the Nyren Bevan Health Board progressing in relation to developing an integrated OT team for Torvine?
Hot off the press. We've got support for an integrated team in Torvine through ABUHB, and we are working at the moment on a project group to bring that together. We met about 3 or 4 weeks ago to put together the vision and the values on an operational basis, and we are translating those visions and values to staff members in the coming week about what our expectations would be. We've aligned OTs from ABUHB to the patches, and it's all systems go, really.
When we say align the ABUHBs, what we're looking at is certainly the occupational therapists currently employed by the Health Board are working from County Hospital and in the Community Resource Team, working together as one group with the occupational therapists employed by the local authority. What we haven't put in that scenario at the moment is occupational therapists that work on the wards in, for example, the Royal Gwent Hospital and Neville Hall. Because on the acute sector, it's a different focus in the acute hospitals. But as Joe said earlier, it's about the vanguard principles of if you've got a client in the community or a client, particularly in a rehab bed in County Hospital, whoever's been involved with that client for the previous 6 months, they will stay involved with that person. So they will follow the person into the hospital, or the client's had some intervention from an OT working on the hospital ward, they will follow them out to check that everything's okay as well. So that we're not looking at these handoffs. It doesn't, and it's not just me saying this, the research and evidence shows that actually in an acute hospital ward, you cannot have that flow. So it is purely around the focus on County Hospital, which is where the majority of our residents would certainly experience their rehab. Oh, sorry, and we've also looked at YAB as well. We will Sputty and Nyren Bevan, that we will have that same principles of following in and out of those hospital beds as well.
So can we expect with our closer collaboration with OTs and quicker assessments possibly, that we see more adoptions done quicker?
The ABUHB hospital OTs, the CRT OTs can recommend adaptations to,
Thank you very much. We'll go on to question 23, Appendix 1, Reference 8, and I'm going to ask Councillor John Gordon to take this, please.
So, how is work on agreeing the joint service standards with partners progressing? And do you think this work should be overseen by the Public Service Board?
We were only, obviously the report has only recently been published, so that we have not yet set up that task and finish group with the RSLs, but there will be certainly some communication with the RSLs over the next week or so. Your point around the public service boards, I would suggest actually that would be guided by yourselves that certainly there is a strategic housing forum, which I think certainly this piece of work would sit very neatly under strategic housing forum, and also link into the health and social care, health and housing forum, which reports into the regional partnership board. And I'm saying that only because the regional partnership board, obviously we've got health, housing and social care as a governance structure that report into the regional partnership board, and I would suggest maybe it sits probably in that forum, but obviously would be guided by yourselves.
Right, we'll go straight to question 24, and you'll be glad to hear, because I'm not informed properly, that this is the last question. Yes. And that's, I would like to ask, Joe will just ask that one, 24 we're on, yeah. I'd like to ask Councillor Nick Jones to take the last question.
We will be brief on that. When you're looking at adaptations, okay, do we consider the Wellbeing of Future Generation Act? So do you actually, when you're assessing, do you just look at what's needed now, or do you look at what's needed for the future?
Okay, OTs would always look at functional ability now, but also try and future-proof as well. But people's disabilities can change over time as well, so it is getting a balance right. If, for example, somebody disability meant that they were going to need support in the bathroom, for example, in the past we may have used bath lifts and things first before we went on to level access showers. Now we go to level access showers first because we know eventually we're going to get to the need for level access shower. So it's more about putting adaptations before sometimes some of the more complex equipment. I don't know if that answers.
Yes, actually it does, because it demonstrates that we are thinking of the future rather than just now, and I think that ties in quite nicely, with the aims of the Future Generation Act. Really, just having a look at the fit for purpose housing that generations to come need to live in. So yes, thank you very much for that.
Thank you for that, Nick. Well, we didn't ask the last question because it had already been answered by the officers, so that was the last question.
Oh, we did miss question 9 out, Chair, so if I may.
We'll go back to question 9 if you wish, yes. Sorry, Rose.
Is the DFG service resourced to the optimum level, considering the rising costs and the benefit of keeping people independent, reducing the needs for intervention?
As I think that we'd already referred to earlier in the meeting, that we do have to call upon some additional resources there from the revenue budget, and I do plan to be going to Capital Board to outline the additional resources that we have having to top up that budget year on year. Obviously, it will be very much up to Capital Board whether they feel that they could allocate any additional resources, given that I understand that the capital is committed elsewhere. However, I still need to raise that as an issue with Capital Board. I think what we have been very good at over the last, I'd say 4 or 5 years, is getting value for money. So certainly, I think, and Joe referred to it earlier, that if you look at we have put additional money into the DFG pot over the last couple of years. But if you look at the changes, I think from looking at the data that you have in front of you, I think from 11-12 we were doing 117 all DFGs at the time. to this year, the 17-18 final figure of the mixture of the low-cost adaptations and DFGs was 199. So from 117 to 199, yes, it is going to cost us more money, but proportionally, our cost per intervention has actually gone down. And I did have it in front of me. Thank you. So from 13-14, actually the average cost of an intervention was 7.8k, and it's now just over 6k. So through our route of going out to contractors through Proactis, we've seen the cost of level access showers come down through the use of modular, and instead of concrete ramping, we've seen that come down. We've extended the framework for additional contractors on stair lifts, so we're not tied to one provider, so that cost has come down. So we are getting more for our money. However, the demand is still going up. So there's only so much that you can bring the cost down per intervention. I think we've done very well in that. And I would, you have to have a certain level, otherwise the quality drops. And certainly, that is an area that we don't want to compromise on.
Obviously, with all this cost, you actually make the savings as well by thinking about future adaptations rather than putting in a small adaptation that will not be useful in 2 or 3 years' time. So can I say, just as a user of the service, and obviously recommending to my residents and others the service, the DFG service is an excellent service, and I've always had the amazing respect for the timeliness of everything and the work that is carried out. So my compliments.
Can I just finish on a note for your reference, really, Joe and Jill? We visited a lady yesterday that had an adoption service, and she was very, very pleased with the adoption that she'd had, and she was particularly pleased with the turnaround that she had as well. And she was very, very glowing in her comments about the services she'd received. So that's a good example. Yeah. It only remains now to thank you both for all the information you supplied this afternoon. Thank you very much. Thank you. Sorry, Pete, did you want to come in?
I just wanted to ask one last thing, and that was, in conversation with another councillor last night, he asked me to ask, do you do many alterations for people who have mental illness or have something similar to autism or autism? Because he felt perhaps they were a long way down the waiting list.
We do. We link in with our colleagues in the learning disabilities teams and our OTs there. We link in with our patch OTs alongside the LD OTs, because the patch OTs will have more experience in adaptations than the LD OTs. But we've done things like padded bedrooms where people have movements that they sort of maybe lash out a bit. So we've done things like that. We've done special beds where people have cot sides and things on the beds. So we do.
Yeah, there are particular conditions where clients need quite a lot of space.
Yeah.
Just given their movements, and that's taken into account as well. And I think we're talking DFGs here. However, we know that we've done some particularly, what I would see, positive work with our housing colleagues, where we've kind of been in there right from the scratch about the design. The OTs have been in there right from the beginning about the design, and actually working with, when we're looking at clients from transition, looking at bespoke, how we're making sure that we're building those adaptations in right from the beginning. And I think as we get more and more the new housing, I think it's going to probably be easier, because that is about the future generations and thinking about being fit for purpose. But to say there are some very good examples where we've done some bespoke work around for clients with especially with autism.
It's brilliant. Thank you very much. Puts my mind at rest. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Faye, because I think sometimes we forget certain groups of people, and I think that was an important question to tease out. Thank you very much. can I suggest that we have 5 minutes comfort break? Okay. Okay, members, we've had a lot of information there to digest, but I think we've gleaned quite a bit out of it and will help us in our recommendations. Ellen, do you want to come in here?
Thank you, Chair. The first thing to do is to remind ourselves of the scrutiny activity. So you need to say whether you're happy with the accuracy of the self-assessment and whether the actions that you've proposed against the recommendations in that self-assessment are appropriate. So if you could indicate whether you think that.
On the floor. Shall I start off? Overall, I think that they're providing a very good service. I mean, there's always room for improvement. I think we'd all agree on that. But by and large, I think there's a lot of good practices going on. And that was evidenced by our visit recently to a lady who was very, very pleased with the adoption she'd received. And it made her life much more manageable. Yeah, by and large, I think that they're doing a good job. There is room for improvement, and perhaps we can make some recommendations in that regard. The one thing I thought that we could perhaps recommend is, to me, I think people in a crisis situation like this, waiting for adoptions, going through the planning process, I wondered if it could be streamlined so that people in the situations they're in could receive, well, for want of a word, preferential treatment, rather, because they are in dire circumstances. I don't know what the rest of the committee think.
Sorry, Chair. Did we pick up from the ladies that if people were waiting, that they were put into alternative accommodation while they're waiting for their works to be done? So maybe it's pleasing to hear that they are considering those needs. And they are going into, I forget the word that she used, but there's step down, that's right, accommodation. So I think maybe some of those needs are at least being thought of. But I take the point that we need to be very mindful of the actual service user themselves, the processes that they're going through and the distress that they are in, and I think we need to address that, very, very particularly to make sure that that is taken into account.
The other area I thought was worth mentioning was, and you pursued it quite heavily, Nick, and I'm glad you did, and that was about the warranty on some of the equipment. We touched on it, if you could pursue getting a longer warranty, and it was all about finance, and but I would have thought it would be peace of mind for people who are having this equipment to know that they had a longer warranty on it than a year. A year seems very short to me. I wonder if we could make any recommendation in that regard.
I've noted you might be minded to recommend looking at an option for the client to purchase an extension to their warranty if it wasn't possible for the council to do that.
Nick had a recommendation.
Nick, have you got a Sorry, Joe. Was Joe first? Ladies first.
Of course.
It's referring to the contractors and the DBS, the recruitment checks. So obviously there's a higher turnover of staff, and they've got their robust recruitment processes, and they do the DBSs, but more on a catch-up. So in real terms, you're having contractors going into people's homes who haven't had DBS checks, which I appreciate. It's a balancing, isn't it? Getting the work done or having the DBS check. But in place of the DBS check, while it's waiting to be done, can we recommend that a full, the word's just gone out of my mind, risk assessment is done and measures put in place to safeguard our residents?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, because we're all concerned about these people are vulnerable at the end of the day, and the different contractors going in and out their home. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Did you want to come in at the stage?
Yes, I did, Chair. What I wanted to just trying to find the actual paragraph that it's in there. I think they accepted that that it would be beneficial to do some form of a follow-up further down the line. I appreciate that they don't want to slow up the process of doing initial assessments, but I think we should recommend definitely that there's a follow-up on the general questionnaire that goes out. And maybe just take that just a little bit further, because I think it's a valuable piece of work, even if it's just done in the form of a questionnaire or questions very specifically highlighted in this general satisfaction, so that we do capture the way that people think once they've actually lived with these adaptations after a period of time, because we could be spending potentially an awful lot of money with adaptations that aren't really fit for purpose, or if they were done very slightly differently, might actually make the quality of life much better going forward. So I think we need to recommend that they do a body of work to capture that information. Because otherwise we will lose it, and it's we're mindful that a piece of paper, a questionnaire, a phone call, rather than tying up an OT, could be the way to do that initially and see what results we get from it.
Jill did say that they could tinker with the notice, didn't she? She said a year, did she say? Intervene and for something else?
She did say that they do some form of a yearly survey which goes out to all users, and that they could add a questionnaire on there if you have already had some work done. But we need that to be more than are you happy or are you not. We don't just want a simple tick box. We need some form of...
Can I just give you an example of a resident of mine that had a DFG. She had both legs amputated and therefore had a house adapted, and then had a ramp outside, but there was no drop curb for it to get down. So it's about bringing into context the surroundings, not just the disabled facilities grant, but that all that work has been put in to that house, but the access, maybe that the drop curb just a bit down the road isn't there, means that she still can't get out of her house. So it's about looking at the big picture. All the work was done to suit the client with the grant that was available to social services, but it might be that they need to involve other partners like the
Highways and such.
yeah, the highways department and things to make sure that that is accessible. So it's about partnership working and thinking about the client, but thinking about the bigger picture of the client. So I don't know how we word that, Helen, but
going back to client feedback, did you want to say investigate a process of going back to people after a considerable amount of time to evaluate the adaptation? Maybe looking at this could be included in the what matters to you question at the next contact, because it doesn't necessarily need to be an OT, maybe.
No, it doesn't need to be an OT. No, it's just
The other thing is, I mean, it's mentioned in the audit report about how we flag these services up to the public. Is there going to be an ongoing improvement with that aspect? Because the auditors was concerned about it. I think we should keep on top of that and improve that area via the website and other advertising.
Okay. Also, I think, listening to your conversation, there was further work required with Anira and Bevan to raise awareness on the wards about using adaptations. I think Jill mentioned that at some point, so if you were reminded to recommend that further work is done with Anira and Bevan.
transition from hospital.
Bill did say that they've worked with Bronhaven and done a lot of work with Bronhaven, but he's still going to be working with other RSLs, and that's important that they do that. They've done a big piece of work with Bronhaven because they are the main RSL in the borough, but they need to keep the progress going with the other RSLs.
Another recommendation we might be mindful to put is around the recycling of equipment which is installed in housing, to make sure that when a particular client no longer needs to use equipment, now that might be because they have different needs, move to another property or sadly pass through. Could we make sure that there's some form of a register to make sure that we don't just make an attachment to deeds of properties, but we actually recycle, that there's some formal process to actually recycle these. I believe they said they kept a register of where some things are, but I think we also need to be mindful of properties that we're adapting and make those either more available to other people who might need to use it in the future. It's just to do a little bit of work to make sure that we're best use of.
I think some
very
of
cumbersome, but I'm sure you can word that much better than I can.
I think some of the stuff are not staircases, obviously, but I'm not quite sure of that even. Some of the stuff goes to Gweises, doesn't it? That's like wheelchair and low adaptation things. But I wouldn't have thought staircases would come into that.
The issue that we got. Sorry, the issue about the repayment of any grants if a property is sold 5 years before the grant is expired 5 years. That is an issue for clawback. But I don't know how we would stand after the 5 years or the recycling of any privately owned. I tried to donate, but it doesn't always work on a privately owned DFG.
You weren't actually allowed to?
No.
Well, I think this is maybe something that we need to have a look at. I can appreciate some of the issues that are around the, when a contract is finished. You don't have a right to go back into it once it's been signed. But certainly in cases where people do want to recycle, we're doing huge work with recycling, our bins and things. So I don't see why we can't. It's all resources of the, the general population, and I'm sure that, if they are fit for purpose, that we should be encouraged to. To have some form, and this could be done at the outset. If you no longer need this equipment, please let us know. We would be very happy to. There are going to be other clients who would be very happy to receive this, even if it was technically second-hand. I'm sure lots of people would be very happy to do that.
Well, funny enough, it could be a sort of an income generation for the department, couldn't it? And in order to. It's not only income stream, it's a benefit to a user that wants that appliance.
Yeah.
So it's a double win, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Also, the issue that I experienced, they prioritise terminally ill or life, and sometimes that period isn't a long time. Therefore, there's people on the category 3 waiting list is waiting a long time for something, whereas I know it's urgent at the time for the care of the person involved, but sometimes that isn't a great length of time either. So, you prioritise it, you put it all in, and it might be just for 3 weeks or 3 months or 6 months, and then that's no longer needed. So that's the issue, isn't it?
Instance, and there have been instances, I imagine, Rose, the warranty's still got 9 months to run on it.
Absolutely,
Yeah. Okay, if there's nothing else, I think we've covered a couple of areas there, some good recommendations there. Do you want to go through them just for everyone's information?
Okay, so we've got further work with Naira and Bevan to raise awareness around the use of adaptations. We've got looking at options for the client to purchase an extension to their warranty. Investigate a process of gaining feedback from people after a considerable amount of time to evaluate the adaptation, and maybe this could be included in their next contact and a what matters to you question. Investigate streamlining the planning process for DFGs. A full risk assessment to be completed if there isn't a DBS check in place and the risk to be managed. And recycling of equipment by means of a register for equipment that's no longer needed, and maybe this could be a formal process at the beginning of an agreement at the beginning of the adaptation. Also, I've noted that you are happy with that the self-assessment is accurate and the actions appropriate.
Sorry, Chair, just one other thing. We were going to put something in there about feedback from contractors if it was negative as to how it would affect their rating for future work going forward. I think that was something that we wanted to sort of build in.
Okay. Thank you, Ellen. Thank you, members. I think we've captured a good bit there, and I think there's some good recommendations there. Again, we're a small committee, so if there were more perhaps committee members here, we'd have had more recommendations. But I think sometimes that quality and quantity, the smaller the quantity, the better the quality sometimes. So, yeah, less is more, Ellen. That's right. So we just need to go back to the agenda now. Okay. So it's item 6, which is the date of the next meeting.
Okay, I don't have the date of the next meeting on me at the moment, but this will be a visioning session where you'll look at selecting your basket of items for the next work programme.
Okay. So it only remains for me to thank you members for putting up with me for these last 2 chairs. I'm sorry I had to stand in and the circumstances that I have stood in, unfortunately. But thank you for your patience. Thank you.